The year was 1901. I stood in my Pittsburgh office, staring at a number so large I had to read it twice. $480 million. That was what JP Morgan just paid Andrew Carnegie for his steel company. Not his entire fortune, just one company. I had competed against Carnegie for 30 years, mill for mill, rail for rail, contract for contract. And in a single afternoon, in a private meeting I was never invited to, he cashed out. He became the richest man in the world, and the rest of us were left holding whatever scraps remained. My name was Charles Schwab, not the broker, the other one, the man who built Carnegie's empire from the inside, then helped Morgan buy it. And what I'm about to tell you is the real story of how America's steel industry was sold in a single weekend. To understand why this sale shook the financial world, you have to understand what Carnegie had built. He arrived in America as a penniless Scottish immigrant in 1848. His father was a weaver destroyed by the Industrial Revolution, his hand loom made obsolete by machines. Carnegie watched that as a boy, and he never forgot it. By the time I met him in the 1880s, he controlled more steel production than the entire country of Great Britain. His mills in Pittsburgh ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The furnaces never went cold. Workers, many of them immigrants like him, though he seemed to forget that, worked 12-hour shifts in heat that made the air shimmer. Carnegie's genius wasn't metallurgy, it was cost. He obsessed over cost the way other men obsessed over power or God. He owned the iron ore mines in Minnesota, the coal fields in Pennsylvania, the railroads and barges that moved raw materials, the coke ovens, the mills, the finishing operations, every step of the chain, his. When our costs went up, we felt it. When Carnegie's costs went up, he just squeezed harder on his own supply chain. By 1900, Carnegie Steel was producing 25% of all the steel in America, and he was just getting started. I want to tell you what it actually felt like to compete against him. Because when you're standing across from Carnegie in the market, he didn't feel like a businessman. He felt like a wall. When a competitor landed a major contract, Carnegie would undercut them on the next bid, not by a little, by 30–40%, enough to make us bleed. The point wasn't just to win the contract, the point was to signal to every buyer in America, come to me or suffer. The Homestead Strike of 1892 showed the other side of that wall. When workers tried to unionize, Carnegie was conveniently in Scotland. He left Frick to handle it. Frick hired 300 armed Pinkerton agents. Men died on both sides. The union was broken. Workers went back to 12-hour shifts, and Carnegie's costs stayed low. That was the man I competed against. And by 1900, even I could see that the only way to stop him was to buy him out. But no single competitor had enough money. Someone else had to do it. John Pierpont Morgan was not a steel man. He was a money man. He had made his fortune reorganizing broken railroads, a process Wall Street called Morganization. By 1900, he had assembled a collection of smaller steel companies into Federal Steel, a competitor to Carnegie, though a distant one. Morgan wanted one unified American steel company, one entity that controlled prices and dominated global markets. But you could not build that company while Carnegie existed outside it. He would simply undercut you until you collapsed. So Morgan needed Carnegie inside the tent. This is where I enter the story. In December 1900, I gave a dinner speech at the University Club in New York. Morgan was in the room. I spoke, perhaps too candidly, about consolidation, about how a unified company could dominate the world. Morgan listened to every word. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "Do you really believe what you said tonight?" he asked. I told him I did. "Then find out if Carnegie will sell. And find out his price." The next morning I went to Carnegie. He was at his mansion on 91st Street. Early, already sharp. Already 3 moves ahead of wherever you thought the conversation was going. I did not tell him Morgan had sent me. I simply asked, as a colleague, as someone who had worked inside his empire for years, if he had ever thought about selling. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up a piece of paper and wrote a number. $480 million. He slid it across the table without a word. That number in 1901 was worth more than the entire annual revenue of the United States federal government. Carnegie wasn't bluffing. He wasn't negotiating. That was his number. Take it or leave it. I took the paper back to Morgan. He looked at it. He didn't flinch. He didn't counter. "Tell him I accept," he said. The entire negotiation, for the largest private transaction in American history to that point, took less than 15 minutes of actual conversation. No lawyers, no due diligence, no financial models. 2 men, 1 number, a handshake. When Carnegie heard that Morgan had accepted without countering, he reportedly said he should have asked for 100 million more. He probably could have gotten it. On April 1st, 1901, the United States Steel Corporation was officially incorporated. The first corporation in American history, valued at over $1 billion. It controlled 213 manufacturing facilities, 41 mines, 1,000 miles of railroad, and 112 Great Lakes vessels. It employed 168,000 people. It produced 67% of all the steel in America. Morgan had done in a single transaction what Carnegie had spent 30 years doing one piece at a time. He bought the mountain instead of climbing it. Carnegie received his payment in gold bonds, not stock, because Carnegie did not trust stock. He spent the rest of his life giving it away. Libraries, concert halls, universities, over 2,500 public libraries around the world. He died in 1919, having given away nearly $350 million, almost everything he had made. He once wrote, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced." He meant it. Here is what the textbooks leave out. The creation of U.S. Steel did not end competition. It distorted it. Because U.S. Steel was so dominant, it didn't need to compete on cost the way Carnegie had. It could simply set prices. The efficiency Carnegie had built, the obsessive cost-cutting, the vertical integration, the relentless innovation, was blunted the moment the company became a monopoly. No incentive to push costs lower when you control the market. Within a decade, U.S. Steel's market share dropped from 67% to below 50%. By 1920, below 40%. The company Morgan built by eliminating competition, ironically, could not compete. Carnegie understood this. That's why he sold. He knew what he had built could only exist while he was the one running it. The moment it became a corporation, governed by boards, shareholders, the inertia of size, it would begin to slow. So he took his money, built his libraries, and let someone else find out the hard way. I watched Andrew Carnegie build an empire over 30 years. I watched JP Morgan buy it in a weekend. And I watched US Steel, the most powerful corporation America had ever seen, slowly lose the very edge that made it worth buying. The $480 million deal is remembered as the moment American capitalism came of age, the birth of the billion-dollar corporation, the deal that proved anything could be bought if the price was right. But what it really was a warning. The men who build things and the men who buy things are not the same men. And when the builders leave, sometimes they take the thing that made it valuable with them. Carnegie took it with him to Scotland and spent it on libraries. The rest of us were left to figure out what comes next.